Welcome to Rise of the Ottomans, a journey through dust and destiny, belief and battle, where a humble tribe becomes the architect of an empire. Across this series, we will uncover how a frontier principality, born in the cracks of fallen powers, rose to become a titan that shaped the fate of 3 continents. Through shifting alliances, divine visions, rebellion, and reform, we will meet the rulers, rebels, mystics, and warriors who built an empire not merely of land, but of legacy. In this opening episode, we step into the mists of origin. We travel back to the Central Asian steppes where the Oghuz Turks roamed and the Kayı tribe began its long, fateful journey west. We follow their passage through Mongol fire and Seljuk twilight, and stand beside Ertuğrul, a man who carved out a foothold on the edge of Anatolia. This is where it begins, with tents and tamgas, with faith and fire, with the whisper that would one day echo through empires. Before each chapter unfolds, let us return to the beginning, not of an empire, but of an idea. Before the empire, before the marble palaces and the trembling of thrones, there was a whisper, a name, a campfire in the wind. The Ottomans did not emerge fully formed. They were forged, breath by breath, in the dust of migration, the silence of prayer, and the clash of steel. This is not just the story of how an empire rose, it is the story of how it dared to begin. Before the gleam of Ottoman swords, before domes crowned the skyline of empires, there were the wide, untamed steppes of Central Asia, wind-blown and eternal. Here, long before borders and banners, lived the Oghuz Turks, a sprawling confederation of clans who followed the rhythm of the sky, the pull of pasture, and the silent language of horses. They were a people of motion. Their homes were not stone, but felt. Their cities, not marble, but the spaces between rivers and ranges. In their world, strength was not measured by how much land you ruled, but how far your name carried in song. Divided into 2 great ancestral wings, the Bozok and the Uchok, the Oghuz tribes were bound by common myths, ancient rituals, and fierce independence. Among them, the Kayi stood proud, claiming descent from the legendary Oghuz Khan himself. Their tamga, a double bow, marked not only a family, but a calling. For centuries, these tribes wandered, trading with Persians, raiding rival nomads, sometimes serving in the armies of great kings, and other times toppling them. Their loyalty lay not with land, but with honor and with survival. Over time, the spiritual life of the Oghuz shifted. Once worshippers of Tengri, the blue sky god, and practitioners of ancient steppe shamanism, they encountered new beliefs along their route west. Islam came not with a sword, but as a story, through merchants, mystics, and the gentle persuasion of Sufi poets. By the time the Kayı reached Anatolia, they had embraced the faith of their neighbors. They prayed to Allah and rode as Ghazis. Theirs was a conversion not wrought by force or conquest, but by something gentler, a love at first sight. Of all the nations to embrace Islam after the time of the Prophet Muhammad, the Turks stand unique, drawn not by sword, but by soul. Yet, in their bones, they still carried the breath of the steppe. Their loyalty was never with land, and it still hasn't changed. It remains with honor, with survival, and now, with their new god, Allah. But even the vastness of the steppe could not protect them from what was coming. The Mongol Empire swift as lightning and wide as the horizon, unleashed chaos that reshaped the known world. Under Genghis Khan and his successors, their thunderous advance drove whole peoples to flight. Cities were reduced to ash, sultans humbled, and centuries of order unstitched in mere seasons. At their peak, the Mongols ruled a swathe of land stretching from the coastlines of China to the gates of Vienna. A single empire of iron, dust, and thunder. For the Oghuz Turks, the Kayı among them, the answer was movement, but not all at once, not directly. Their westward drift was not the tale of a single migration, but a journey of many steps and many years. They moved first through Transoxiana, across the lands of Khwarezm and Khorasan. Some paused near Merv, others wandered through the highlands of northern Iran and into Azerbaijan. There, in the borderlands of fractured empires, they waited and watched. The Mongols came again, and so the Kayı moved again. Through Erzurum and Ahlat, then to the valleys of eastern Anatolia. Perhaps they rested in Bitlis, perhaps merely passed through. The chronicles are hushed on this. But we know this: they did not stop. What drove them? Fear, yes, but also purpose. The steppes had taught them that survival belonged not to the strong, but to the swift, the wise, and the willing. They were but a gust within a storm, ducking beneath the clouds of Mongol conquest, weaving through ruins and embers, never staying long enough to be caught by the lightning. And so they came, at last, to the edge of the Seljuk world. A land torn but fertile, a land aching for defenders, a land waiting. It was not a single caravan or moment, but a long, winding journey through fear, hunger, and hope. A trek across the broken Seljuk lands toward the uncertain light of Anatolia. A frontier, both promising and perilous. And at the heart of this wandering people, one name would rise above the dust and the din. A man who would not only guide his tribe, but shape its destiny. His name was Ertuğrul. It was a curious arrangement. A wandering Turkmen chieftain and a fading sultan with a faltering grip on power. And yet, between them, a compact was formed. Loyalty in exchange for legitimacy, protection in return for purpose. Ertuğrul had come to Anatolia not just with his tribe, but with his reputation. Whether through luck, skill, or both, he arrived at a time when the Seljuk Sultanate, though weakened, still wore the vestiges of imperial grandeur. Alaeddin Keykubat I, cultured, calculating, and desperate to secure his borders, saw in Ertuğrul something valuable. According to tradition, Ertuğrul's loyalty was tested early. Near Ankara, he and his warriors are said to have stumbled upon a battle between two forces. One, the Seljuks. The other, their enemies. Ertuğrul did not hesitate. He chose a side, the Seljuks, and charged into the fray. His intervention reportedly turned the tide. Whether this tale is true or embroidered by later chroniclers, the result remains the same. Ertuğrul earned the Sultan's trust. In return, he was granted the border town of Söğüt, along with nearby Domaniç, not as land to rule freely, but as a military outpost, a bastion on the frontier. A blade pointed westward. Söğüt was no capital. It was a village of stone and timber, hemmed in by mountains and watched always by the Byzantine border. But it was also opportunity. A platform from which to raid, to defend, to grow. Ertuğrul was now an Uchbey, a frontier lord. His mission was clear: defend the Seljuk Sultanate's western flank, hold back the Byzantines, and bring order to a region riddled with lawless bands, rebellious beys, and fading empires. But he was more than a sword for hire. Ertuğrul balanced force with faith, pragmatism with purpose. He welcomed scholars, mystics, and traders. He established Friday prayers in local mosques and encouraged the construction of markets. Slowly, Söğüt became not just a military outpost, but a home. By aligning with the Seljuks, Ertuğrul brought his people peace and time. Time to grow. Time to gather strength. And time for the next chapter of the story to begin. One that would be written not in borrowed land, but in ambition, fire, and the hand of a young man named Osman. The frontier was not a place for the faint of heart. It was neither fully Islamic nor wholly Christian, neither civilized nor truly wild, but something in between, a fractured mosaic of crumbling Byzantine forts, wandering Turkic tribes, roving bandits, and villagers caught in the middle. For Ertuğrul, this was both a danger and a gift. His settlement in Söğüt sat at a fault line, not only between civilizations, but between eras. To the east, the Seljuks still held court with Persian poets and faded glory. To the west, the Byzantines clung to their old walls, watching the horizon like men waiting for the tide. Here, in this volatile zone, Ertuğrul made his mark. He and his people were newcomers, recent arrivals among older, more entrenched Turkmen principalities that had long carved their domains into the fabric of Anatolia. These beyliks boasted deeper histories, stronger armies, and firmer bonds with the Seljuk crown. Compared to them, the Kayı were small, their numbers modest, their past in these lands barely written. But what they lacked in legacy, they made up for in purpose. He understood that war was not always a matter of pitched battles. It was skirmish and surprise, marriage and message. And it was never just about land. It was about legitimacy. Raids against Byzantine outposts became routine, some brutal, some strategic. Grain was seized, fortresses harassed, roads made unsafe. And each success brought more warriors to his cause, young Turkmen looking not just for spoils, but for a leader with vision. Yet not all enemies wore armor. The western frontier teemed with outlaw warlords, some Muslim, some Christian, who ruled by fear and blade. Among them was the feared Tekfur, Byzantine governor of Kulukahisar, a fortress that loomed like a stone eagle over the plains near Söğüt. Ertuğrul eyed it not with fear, but with intent. According to Ottoman tradition, he led a daring campaign to seize the fortress. Whether it was truly captured during his lifetime or later by Osman is debated. But the legend itself speaks to something greater, that Ertuğrul was no mere guardian of Seljuk order. He was testing the limits of what was possible. Meanwhile, tensions with rival Turkmen beys festered. Many viewed Ertuğrul's rise with suspicion. Why should one man's banner fly higher than theirs? Why should a Seljuk puppet command so much loyalty? But Ertuğrul knew how to walk the line. He answered challenges with strength, but not arrogance. He gave gifts where he could, and made examples where he must. What emerged in Söğüt was not just a fortified town, but the early shape of a state, a leadership based not on wealth, but charisma, piety, and the promise of something new. And so, in a world still recovering from Mongol fires and Byzantine decline, a quiet power was gathering, under a blue banner, across the rolling hills of western Anatolia. A power that would soon pass from father to son. If the sword built the frontier, it was faith that steadied it. Ertuğrul's world was one of not just power and pressure, but of profound belief. For the Turkmen tribes, Islam was not an imperial institution. It was a lived faith, intimate and breathing, woven into every breath of wind and every swing of a sword. In this world, men of letters and men of spirit were as respected as warriors. Among the most revered was Sheikh Edebali, a Sufi mystic, scholar and guide, a man whose quiet counsel would echo for generations. Edebali's home in the town of Inagol became a sanctuary for travellers, seekers and soldiers alike. But it was more than a lodge. It was a forge of ideas. A place where faith met wisdom, where prayer gave birth to understanding. Ertuğrul visited often, seeking advice not just for his soul, but for his people. He understood that a Beylik, a principality, could not grow on conquest alone. It needed purpose, it needed legitimacy, and above all, it needed vision. It was here that Ertuğrul's son, Osman, came under Edebali's influence, not as a ruler, but as a young man. One night, as tradition tells it, Osman slept in the Sheikh's lodge and dreamed. In his dream, a tree grew from his chest, its branches spreading over the world. Its roots drew from rivers, its leaves shaded cities, and its trunk was firm and eternal. When Osman awoke, the Sheikh understood. This was no mere dreamer blinking at the morning light. This was a boy cradling the architecture of empires in his chest, a sapling born to bear the weight of history's branches. What stirred in him was not just destiny, but design. And so, Osman was given the hand of Edebali's daughter in marriage, a union not just of hearts, but of visions, a marriage between sword and scripture, bloodline and belief. Back in Söğüt, Ertuğrul ruled with restraint. He did not crown himself king. He held no grand court. But what he did offer was rare. Stability, purpose, and a sense that the future belonged not to decaying empires, but to something still becoming. The Friday sermon, the khutbah, was said in the name of the Seljuk Sultan. Yes, but the people knew where the real authority lay. The Seljuks still reigned in name. Distant sultans with fading scrolls and borrowed armies. But they no longer ruled. Their throne in Konya had become ceremonial, a formality beneath Mongol oversight. The empire was not dead, but it had begun to mumble. It was not in Konya. It was here, in the shadow of the mountains, beneath the modest tent of a quiet bey with iron in his voice. And when that voice finally fell silent around the year 1280, it was not an end. It was an inheritance. As the embers of one life faded, a new fire began to flicker. The winds that had carried the Kayi across continents now turned toward a young heir, whose footsteps would soon echo far beyond the highlands of Anatolia. Ertuğrul's tale was not a conclusion. It was a threshold. In our next episode, we trace the path of Osman, born into a tent, raised on the edge of collapsing empires, and destined to craft a realm from resolve alone. What begins as a modest principality will, in time, stake its claim in a world fractured by ambition, daring not only to survive, but to redefine sovereignty itself. From a patch of contested frontier, it will rise, generation by generation, into a world power that would shape 3 continents, hold sway for 6 centuries, and stand as one of the longest-lasting and most formidable empires in recorded history. The story of the Ottomans is only beginning. A dream has been planted, and the soil of Anatolia is fertile.